and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, blow the dust off them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. My name's Tom Galley, and joining me today is Tony Pasculi.
Thanks, Tom.
And this marks the beginning of our 4th year of podcasting here. How are we going to celebrate the occasion?
We're going to celebrate by reading some Heinlein.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so today we have Tunnel in the Sky, which, according to my edition, says it's part of Heinlein's juvenile series, Book 9. I think he wrote like 15 or 16 of these.
Yeah, and I was completely unaware of the juvenile series until we did Have Spacesuit Will Travel.
Really? You hadn't read any of the juveniles?
I think I may have read them, but had not consciously realized they were their own
They weren't
thing.
aimed at a different audience. There's a lot less sex in them. Yeah, like none. There's none
true,
sex.
true. This book was relatively sex light.
Yeah. It's fun. They're almost, I think, a sort of pure distillation of Heinlein than the adult books. I think the adult books, he sort of gets into the weeds sometimes. He gets really philosophical. And here he's just like, got something to say. Here's my worldview. Here's some characters. Bam! And they're fun and they're engaging and they're fast reads and they're, just delightful. And this is one of my favorites. It's about a future society that has invented portal technology, basically, and they can open up portals to anywhere. And especially, uniquely, and compared to a lot of books, you don't have to go to that place first. You can just fine-tune the portal and beam people straight to that spot. Mm-hmm. You have to get to the other end and set up a receiving portal there. So people are emigrating because Earth is populated, and they're sending people all over the place. And there's a class you can take in a high school, which is basically survival class, and you have to pass this class to be considered as a colonist. And this kid wants to be considered a colonist, and so he takes his class. And the final exam is they dump you on a random planet and see if you can survive for, 48 hours to 10 days?
That was the window of this particular test. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And then, of course, because it's a novel, everything goes wrong from there. Yeah.
It is a fun concept. Now, you can take the class in high school and then opt out at the end and repeat the class in college.
Yes.
Should you think that being alone on a foreign planet as a 16-year-old was less than a stellar idea? And in fact, our heroes' parents have some thoughts on that matter.
Yeah, one of the things that's great about, all of his books is that, with the juveniles, is that his protagonists, who are young people, have a lot of agency, and the parents are always trying to tell them, don't have so much agency. Like in, what was it we read? This isn't a juvenile, but Starship Troopers. Everyone's trying to talk about enlisting. Mm-hmm. It's like, don't enlist, son. Don't be an idiot. Don't throw your life away. It's like, no, man, this is what I want to do. Yeah? So same thing here. It's very similar. In fact, I think I was thinking of this the whole time we were talking about Starship Troopers, because this reminds me very much of Starship Troopers.
As I was reading this story, I kept thinking about Johnny Rico.
Yeah.
This character is John. This is Johnny Rico's origin story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun, and it's got a lot of my favorite Heinlein things in it. We've talked about this before in the context of How Spacesuit Will Travel, but this idea of extremely advanced education, which always, as I was a kid reading these books, made me think I was missing out. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about Rod, this guy's name is Rod, and he's watching the colonists zoom out through these portals. Rod did not have the mathematics to appreciate the difficulties. Being only about to finish high school, his training had gone no further than tensor calculus, statistical mechanics, simple transfinites, generalized geometries of 6 dimensions, and on the practical side, analysis for electronics, primary cybernetics and robotics, and basic design of analog computers. He had had no advanced mathematics as yet.
I loved that passage.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm like, man, I got ripped off in high school.
Yes, my experience was very different. That's such a neat scene, though. I love the fact that one of the things you can do to spend time is to go to this hub and simply watch people coming and going from foreign planets.
Yeah.
And I really thought it was just mean-spirited that you had to pay money to get the audio.
Yes.
You could watch, but you couldn't listen unless you put a coin in the slot.
Yeah. Everything. You got to put in a Pluton, where they call Plutons and it only got you like 5 minutes of audio too. I don't know how much a Pluton is, but it sounds like a lot to listen to 5 minutes of audio.
It does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sums him up because this is what he's doing rather than preparing for something that's very important. He's going to still, waste half an hour just to go daydream watching these people head out into the great unknown.
I think I took it a little more charitably like that he's not wasting time daydreaming, that he's focusing on why this is so important to him, because that's him someday. So he doesn't want to go out there and just go, oh, this is difficult, I don't want to do it. He's sort of dialing into why this is so important to him. Or Heinlein's doing that for us. Yeah, either way. Yeah.
Although you get a little bit farther forward in the book, and then you wonder, what preparations would he be making? What studying could he be doing?
It's interesting. There's a lot of discussion about, so you get dumped on a random planet. How do you prepare? And he's learned, I assume as part of this class, he's learned basic self-defense. He's a pretty good marksman with a pistol and a rifle and a bow. Mm-hmm. He can fight with a knife. He can climb a tree. He can build a fire. I mean, he's like an uber Boy Scout. Yeah. But there's a lot of discussion like, what exactly do you bring? You've got a kilo limit. I don't remember what it was. It's like, do you show up in a spacesuit because any planet could be an airless moon? And the teacher goes, no, you're an idiot if you think we would drop you on an airless moon, because half the class would fail because they wouldn't have spacesuits. We're not going to drop you in acid. We're going to drop you into lava, but we might drop you in the ocean swimming distance from shore. So don't bring a raft. Do bring a towel. Yeah.
Right. Always know where your towel is.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that I love is that his sister, his older and wiser sister, convinces him not to bring a gun.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know that I completely agree with her, but her reasoning and the way it pays off is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense to me. I don't own a gun, and this is one of the reasons why, is unless you are highly, highly trained with a gun, you are likely to get into more trouble with a gun than without a gun.
Yeah. Well, her idea being, if you know you can't defend yourself, you will really make sure not to get into trouble.
Exactly. Yeah.
You will hide and you will crawl and you will go away. You will never think to go challenge something.
Yes. Whereas if you have a gun, you think, why should I back down? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how you get into trouble. Sidebar, interesting tidbit related to this a little bit. I just learned why I think British forces in some land war in Africa, I want to say Rhodesia, wore short pants. And you think, what? You're fighting in a war? Why are you wearing shorts? Shorts and regular shoes as opposed to combat fatigues and army boots, right? And the reason is there was a lot of brush, and the British soldiers would tend to go crashing through the brush, giving away the position and getting ambushed frequently. And their higher-ups were always telling them, do not go crashing through the brush. Please use the existing trails. You can move silently, and you're more likely to encounter the enemy because they will also be on those. But you will have an equal advantage because you will not be crashing through the brush. And no matter how many times they told this to them, they wouldn't do it. They would always take shortcuts. So they took their pants away. They took their pants away, and they're like, oh, we can't go wading through the brush now. We're going to get ripped to shreds. And it worked. So,
that's fantastic.
So similar logic there, I think. Yeah.
Well, there was one of the other students did go through with a ridiculous amount of guns, something that had that required a backpack power unit and was a shoulder-mounted weapon. And
isn't he the first one to die?
Our hero finds him dead.
Yeah.
2 days later.
Yeah.
His corpse and the big-ass gun is still lying there.
Yeah.
But later comes back, and parts of it are used to make a boiler, if I recall correctly.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other reasons I love this book is, like a lot of Heinlein's books, it is very, very hopeful and positive. And in a way, it is the antithesis of The Lord of the Flies. And I love The Lord of the Flies. The Lord of the Flies is a great book, but too many people took it as reality. It's like we're just one plane crash away from absolute chaos and anarchy and a fall into discivilization. And here, Heinlein is presenting the opposite thesis, is that no, we're men with a capital M, not gendered, and wherever we are, civilization is, and we will make a home for ourselves, we will make a life for ourselves, because, we didn't mention this part yet, because, of course, their window doesn't open after 48 hours to 10 days. They get stranded for, what is it, a year, 2 years?
It's long enough for there to be toddlers.
Yes.
So that's got to be on the 2-year or 3-year range, yeah.
Long enough for people to have given up all hope of rescue, gotten married, and have children.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was such a nice setup. I didn't at all put it together. But the third or fourth night that Rod's there, right, he's made a friend.
Yeah.
And they're out looking at this, because he's decided they're on Earth in Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the friend takes him out to a clearing where the sky is clear and you can look up and see the stars. It's like, oh,
Yep.
not Earth. But while they're out there, the friend's like, that star wasn't there last night. We're seeing a nova.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Rod couldn't care less. He's busy being sulky because we're not on Earth, and he was wrong. He was so very, very wrong.
Yes.
But I mean, that's it. We get that one throwaway. And then we get to the end of the book, and we find out this is the source of the disruption. This is why the gate didn't materialize, is because the energy from that nova reached and it scrambled portal space. And it has been taking them those years to reestablish contact.
Yeah, and I think if this was an established colony, they would have been easier to reestablish contact because they would have had, people in place. But because they were just shooting a bunch of kids through it for their final exam, there was no way to quickly reestablish contact, which has interesting implications, namely that there are no proctors, there's no oversight. This is a genuine test. And this is where I think Heinlein is a little extreme, as he is, I think, also with Starship Troopers. It's like, we're just going to send these high school kids, and some of them will die, sure, but the ones that come back...
They are very cavalier about that, the idea, because there would be no repercussion.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go on a murder spree, right, this is the opportunity, because all that happens is you come back and you've survived. Yep. End of story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's an implication that someone does that, like there are people who are out there murdering other people.
Well, the kid
stuff.
with the big gun was sniping. He was camped at the respawn point and was sniping people. Yeah. He missed Rod, and Rod learns the value of not having a gun and gets the hell out of there. Mm-hmm. And then 2 days later finds the kid's mostly eaten corpse and weapon.
Yeah. Yeah, so he had it coming. And there is this is well after when they should have been picked up. There is a little bit of a confrontation with a group that just moves in. They've established a cave at this point, and they have a small group of survivors who gather together and pool their resources. And a couple of older, bigger, tougher kids come by and say, we're going to take everything that's yours. And they manage to drive them away.
Rod has the opportunity because the camp is all in favor of murdering these four. Yeah. Right. And Rod imposes his will and says, no, we'll just let them go in their underwear. Yeah. You can take one knife with you and that's it. Go away. Yeah. And I know what Heinlein is saying, and I know the morals of this. I think that was so the wrong call.
I think so too.
And it comes back to, go figure, it comes back to bite him, right? Yeah. A year later, one of the people shows back up, and they take pity and let him in, and then he's nothing but bad news, and ends up, he and Rod end up in a confrontation. Yeah. Which, again, Rod made the wrong choice in. There's no reason for him to fight.
This is something we've returned to. Like, this was in Elric. We talked about it in Elric, like killing a raccoon, and again in For Whom the Bell Tolls. When you decide to kill someone, if someone has clearly announced himself as your enemy, your mortal enemy, not just like, I dislike you, but they are willing to kill you, kill them. Yep. Yeah. And move on. I'm going to say that's in the context of a war setting or a
stranded on a hostile planet.
Not in the context of Honolulu, call the police, let the police deal with it. But,
not that guy who always votes against your motions in faculty senate. That doesn't apply.
Just to clarify, not that we get a lot of comments, but preempt that.
Yeah. But it's hard not to think of Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things, I might have missed this in the book, but it's kind of a big deal for high school students to be taking this test. It's generally a college level thing. Yeah. The fact that high school students can do it is kind of like advanced placement, I guess, right? Yeah. And yet, all the people that they come across on the planet, with the exception of a half dozen, are peers or high school students. Yeah. This whole test group was high school students with a few college students sprinkled in, and the college students are all problematic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can justify that in a couple ways. One, I think it was mostly high school students that went through. This is supposed to be a relatively easy planet. And two, I think the college students have a little bit of gun cockiness to them. It's like, they're just,
I don't have a problem with the college students being the problem, but it seems odd to me that the distribution was so heavily weighted to the high school side, which seems to be the exception rather than the rule for people taking the
That's
test.
an interesting point.
Although it might have just been, we tend to group people together, and the college students were actually the aberration there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think that more of the college students were going to other planets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe there's a grading system. Yeah. They're on the curve. They're on the high school curve. All right. So this has, sorry, where is it? I highlighted it and it didn't show up in my highlights. Beware of Stobor. I love the whole concept of Stobor. As the last thing before you go through, they say, "Oh yeah, watch out for Stobor." And like, wait, what's a Stobor? What's a Stobor? Shoof, and you're through.
Yep.
Yeah, and then
I love that detail so much that they handed him a piece of paper, and the piece of paper had information about where he was going. Not very much information, and the last sentence on that piece of paper is, "Look out for the Stobor," and then they yank that piece of paper away from him. He has it in his possession for almost about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And the guy who's standing in front of the actual gate's like, "Give me that back. You have to go through in 10 seconds. And he's like, "I'm going to read this for 10 more seconds." But they yank it out of his hands. They don't let him even take that little piece of paper with no meaningful information on it through the gate with him.
Yeah.
I just love that. It reminds me of being in a role-playing game, a Call of Cthulhu game, and Andy was game mastering, and we found a letter that had a lot of information, and we're passing around the table, and he just reaches over and snagged it out of someone's hands and put it away. It's like, and this beast came and took it from you. And then we were involved in combat, right? But it's like,
That's awesome.
we actually had to depend on our memory.
So I love the Stobor thing because it's like the knife thing. They spend the entire book. Rod spends the entire book trying to figure out what are the Stobor. At first he thinks it's these loud screaming things in the jungle, and then it turns out they're just birds that make a lot of noise. They're not actually that dangerous. And then there's this giant carnivore. That must be the Stobor, until no, they run into something else, which is even more dangerous than the carnivores, which I won't spoil for you if you haven't read the book. And they figure that must be the Stobor. And then when they finally do get rescued, it's like, oh no, we just tell that to everybody. Just so you'll be on the alert. There's always a danger. Every planet is dangerous. Don't relax. Watch out for Stobor. Just sort of becomes a code for just, watch out. Be careful. Be alert. Don't take anything for granted. This is sidebar. Have you watched the show Mythic Quest by any chance?
Does not ring a bell.
Apple TV Plus.
Okay,
If you ever get a 1 week trial to Apple TV Plus, first you got to jam through all of Ted Lasso, and then watch Mythic Quest, because it's about a game company that's doing a massively multiplayer online RPG, and it's really fun. It's very funny, but in particular, it has a couple of standalone episodes that have nothing to do with this game company. And one of them is about 3 young would-be science fiction authors who meet and get hired as copy editors at the same time. And it's just one of my favorite episodes of television. And their watchword among themselves, because they're all Heinlein fans, this is all in the past, is watch out for Stobor. Yeah. So,
and you knew what that meant.
I did. I was like, yes.
I get that joke.
Yeah.
Heinlein is always fun. He's got a voice, and there's a certain sense of sarcasm or irony that goes along with some of his descriptions. Mm-hmm. Early in the book, he's talking about how the exploration of space evolves. And the chapter's called The Fifth Way. And it's talking about the development of portals, but it starts out, rocket ships did not conquer space, they merely challenged it. A rocket leaving Earth at 7 miles per second is terribly slow for the vast reaches beyond. Only the moon is reasonably near, 4 days more or less. Mars is 37 weeks away. Saturn a dreary 6 years. Pluto an impossible half-century by the elliptical orbits possible to robots. I love the way he takes orbital mechanics, something that complex and multifaceted, and just breaks it down into this one little paragraph of, you can't do that.
He's great. Heinlein was a technical advisor on Destination Moon, I want to say. Some early sort of documentary feel movie about spaceflight. Yeah, so he knew what he was talking about.
I remember when we did The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, bitching about the fact I didn't feel like he spent enough time on the orbital mechanics of Mike bombarding the Earth. And yet here I'm applauding the fact he's taken that subject and just put it into a cute little paragraph of description.
I mean, knowing Heinlein, it may be that he had done all the work and we just weren't appreciating it. So, because he tends to be good about that. So earlier you mentioned that Rod, our main character, runs into someone, and he's got this great theory. Rod has this great theory that they're in Africa because it makes a lot of sense. Because they could, in fact, monitor these kids if they were in Africa. They could have satellite imaging. They'd be a quick, a plane ride away from rescue.
His logic was sound.
Yeah, his logic really was sound, except for the fact that it wouldn't be in the spirit of the test. And you mentioned that you didn't use this word, that Rod gets pretty butthurt when he finds out that his theory isn't true. And it's interesting that he is corrected by his buddy Jack, who, of course, turns out to be a girl.
Yes.
Yeah. So... who does not suffer from the same sorts of... She does not have an ego that gets in her way nearly as often as Rod's does. Rod's ego trips him up on a number of occasions.
It does.
Yeah.
And somehow he ends up in charge.
Yeah, which is interesting. I mean, I think he is the best leader for the camp, but... Because, Jack doesn't want to do it. Jack doesn't want to be in charge.
No.
Yeah.
Who's the other one, the older one that does end up in charge?
I can't remember. The one that first... So now that we're in charge, first we have to do a constitutional
right,
Congress
that was the guy. His last name was Cowper, right? Because they end up naming their settlement Cowperstown.
Cowperstown, yeah.
I don't know. I felt... Clearly, when he gets the position and they start going off, and he picks all of his buddies from his school to head all the committees, and they start taking all the power, but they don't ever do anything.
Yeah.
He and Rod have a conversation later on, and he is frustrated himself with how ineffectual he's being and how pointless everything has become. He sees it, he just doesn't know what to do about it. At that moment, I really felt a lot of empathy towards that. And he, unlike Rod, was more willing to set aside ego and work together to try and make this thing work. Rod eventually goes along with it, but again,
That was a fascinating section of the book, and it reminded me a lot of what's the last third of Moon is a Harsh Mistress is all about, sort of establishing a new government on the moon after the successful revolution. Revolution comes and goes. Yay, it's done. We won. No, this is where the work starts. Yeah.
Get this yammerhead off my back.
So I thought that was wonderful because at first it seems very, very nefarious that this guy just sort of takes over, appoints all his friends, we're in charge, and we're just going to bury everyone in bureaucracy. We're going to, annex a bunch of items. We're going to change the way everything happens. And it's like, but he really is well-intentioned, and just these things are hard. And Rod knows they're hard. He experienced it in a different way. He wasn't trying to solve it. He was just trying to solve it with just do the right thing, guys. What's so hard? And that's not always, once you scale up to a certain point, they have basically a communistic society before that, which works very, very well for something about the size of a family unit.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get beyond that, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And so they try to bring a real constitution in, and it's just like, oh my God, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cowper even talks about none of us are trained to do this. None of us have studied this. I've taken a couple of classes, but none of us have equipped for this.
Yeah.
And Rod's like, screw you, I'm mad at you still. And then Rod is the one that ends up naming Cowperstown when the guy does. Sacrificed himself for the greater good, pointlessly, but still, it was noble.
Not Rod's finest moment. But then... Again, this is the thing I appreciate in this narrative, is that he's the protagonist. He's nominally the hero. He's not always right. He is often wrong. He is often wrong. And I think Heinlein just lays out enough evidence you can go, I don't know, Rod. Yeah, so.
Yep. Yeah. And, at the end, people come back. Rod honestly thinks that nobody's going to return to Earth, or very few people will return to Earth. He honestly thinks that most of them are going to stay there and continue working in their community.
Yeah.
He's surprised and hurt. I don't guess there's anything wrong with being hurt, but he's honestly surprised that no one, literally no one, wants to stay behind. A couple of his buddies are willing to stay behind, but no one wants to stay behind.
Well, we know from the beginning that Rod wants to be a colonist. So this is his dream all along, is to go out and break trail and, build his own sort of, not empire, but landhold. But everyone else is just taking a high school test, man.
Yeah.
They want to get back to the legend. Some of them have kids now. They're not just going to stay in this environment with no medical care with kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, they want education. They want civilization. Yeah.
Netflix.
That was another amazing thing. And this is so there's like a whole online discourse about trad culture coming back, which is mired in the culture war, and it's unfortunate. But so this is great. They talk about how because they don't have books, they don't have movies, they don't have TV, they have no entertainment, they have to make their own entertainment. And it's glorious. It's everybody's square dancing every night. It's incredibly social. Nobody's lonely. Everybody has a good time. Everyone has a purpose. Everyone feels useful. Everyone feels good, except for the few people who just like, no, I have to be in charge, and they get driven out of the community. It really is kind of a paradise. And so I think Rod recognizes that and is like, why would you trade this for that? Why would you trade this for that? Because
you're actual citizens. You're going to go back to being kids.
Yes. Yeah. It's like the end of Narnia when they come back and you were kings and queens of Narnia, and now you have to go back to grade school.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about this. So something you said jogged my memory, but the reporter, the documentarian that shows up, and they're trying to turn it into Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
Right. They want it to be tribal dances. And you have somebody that comes up and sprays Rod's face with makeup to make him look more savage. They want it to be about a degenerate bunch of about the breakdown of society.
Yes. I actually highlighted that quote. The reporter says, "Oh, wonderful. It shows how thin the line is between man and beast. 100 cultured boys and girls slipping back to illiteracy, back to the Stone Age, the veneer slewing away, reverting to savagery." And Rod's like, "No, we had laws. We had a constitution. We kept clean." She's like, "Savage ceremonies, a village witch doctor."
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Anyway, very, very fun read. Highly recommend it. And it's short, and it's fast, and it's punchy, and it's just full of surprises, and it's full of Heinlein. It's full of Heinleinisms. With all that implies, good and bad. Good and bad. I love it, but I know he's not everybody's taste, so...
I found it a really enjoyable read. Definitely, and it's reminiscent of many things, but it's a lovely coming of age story, and
all right, that's all I got. That's all I got on Tunnel in the Sky. You got anything else?
Oh, I'm good. Like I said, I really enjoyed this. I didn't know this book before, so this is a good read.
Yeah, surprised it isn't a movie, honestly.
Could well be.
Yeah. All right, what's next?
I thought we'd stick with some of the old timers of sci-fi. Do a little Jules Verne with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Classic.
All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.